Hello, everybody. This is Kevin Jones coming to you from Los Angeles, California. So good morning to all of you out here on the West Coast. Good afternoon to everybody on the East Coast, and way over in the other parts of the world, good evening. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have the privilege of talking with one of my most famous, she is famous, and favorite people at the Fitted Museum, Leigh Wishner. So I'm just going to call up Leigh right now. Right. We are today going to be talking textiles and all the fun. Oh, there she is.
Hey, Kevin. I heard now, I'm famous.
You are. You're famous. You're also infamous, I hear.
Yes, as well.
So I love Leigh, and I love her passion, especially for textiles. And you know, I'm fortunate that I get to work with her every day of the week, almost. And I always look forward to seeing what she is going to be wearing, because she is not scared of pattern. And no. I think that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today is really great patterns. But before we get started, I want to give everybody a little bio background for Leigh. Leigh Wishner is the Registrar Coordinator at the Fitted Museum. She's actually now been with us for over 3 years, but the first 2 years, or almost 3 years, was as our coordinator, and she's now just taken on the position of Registrar, which we're very excited about. From 2012 to 2017, she served as the curatorial assistant in the Costume and Textiles Department at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. Prior to that, Leigh was an associate for over 10 years at Core Ginsberg LLC, which is a New York gallery specializing in antique textiles and clothing. Hello, Titi Holly from the West Coast. Her background includes a BA in art history and archaeology from Barnard College in New York. Leigh was originally going to be an Egyptologist archaeologist, but made a left turn. And an MA in decorative arts and fashion and textile history from Bard Graduate Center, also in New York. Leigh has a passion for 20th century textiles, fashion, thank God, interiors, and is currently developing a book project that is called Pattern Play USA, A Century of American Textile Design. Very, very excited to talk with you today, Leigh, about all things not solid.
Don't get me wrong, I love color too, and I love a good solid color, but my brain is hardwired for pattern, so.
Ever since you were a child. Do you have any photos of you? I should have asked you earlier of, you know, in like real clashing plaids and real in polka dots.
I remember, yes, there was a lot of esprit in my wardrobe, and esprit. I give them credit for probably launching a lot of my pattern mixing and matching, because they would create these lines that you could just put everything together. And my mom enthusiastically approved. I think my mom was really instrumental in developing my love for pattern and color. She was a very colorful woman.
That's great. So I just have to ask personally, are there ever any patterns that don't go together?
Yeah, sure there are. It's like, I'm not going to be very PC to say, but it's like pornography, you know it when you see it. Like, yeah. You can tell when there's patterns that just, oh no, those shouldn't be together. But, you know, it's actually a skill that you can develop. You just have to be bold enough to try and decide if it looks good or not. And it's up to you to decide, really.
Right. Well, I have to say, thanks to you, I have tried to be a little bolder in my patterning. Now, you probably wouldn't see it today necessarily. I do tend to stick with kind of solids and darks, but I do like to have an accent of something.
I love the Fornasetti. That's a really great Fornasetti tie. I believe the Fitted Museum collection has one.
We do, yes, and we will have this one someday as well. So thank you for all those who are joining today. This is Collection Conversations from the Fitted Museum. So we tailor everything, whether we're talking with our in-house curatorial folk or our visitors from around the world who love and support the Fitted Museum as much as we do. It centers around at least an object in the museum's collection, and today we have at least 3 objects to talk about, which is exciting, and a designer that Leigh and I both love very much. Just absolutely quintessential, defines America in the mid-century, mid-20th century. So should we get started, Leigh?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the first one we're going to look at the designer is Claire McCardell. If you didn't know from the advertisements for today's talk. So this day dress, sundress, has been in the museum's collection since 1977. So truly, this was actually one of the very, very first objects to come into the museum's collection, has been with us for more than 40 years now, and was actually in the collection before it became the nonprofit foundation, which it is today, starting in 1978. So she's a really early girl for us.
She's one of my favorite pieces in the entire collection. And there's a lot of reasons. I think the style, first and foremost, is something that is hard to top. I think Mcardle, one of the reasons that she is, I mean, as close to a household name in American fashion as one can be, I think one of the reasons she is a household name practically is because she created designs for herself, first of all, which is always a good philosophy when you're designing. You don't want to design something you wouldn't want to wear. Second, she designed for the modern American woman to be free of a lot of different fussy things. She wanted to make sure it was easy fit, customizable fit, and easy to care for fabrics that moved with you, and you didn't need any specific undergarments to make it happen for you. And the thing is, she designed this dress, the style is called the Monastic Dress. It debuted in, I think, 1938, and this is from 1952. That's a pretty big span when you're talking about fashion cycles and trends and things that evolve, and this is in one day and out the next. I mean, we're all familiar with that. It was happening back then as well, but she stuck with what worked a lot of the time. And so a silhouette that worked in 1938 can work in 1952, clearly, and it works today. I mean,
I think we would call it a classic.
I guess. I would say we would call it a classic. I mean, and you know, I think that there's a lot of you know, pejoratives about designers who don't evolve or don't change their styles and adapt and reflect their times. And I think she was immune to that. She knew what she was doing was good. She knew she had a client base.
So
continually.
Being a classic, I think it's interesting also that, you know, you wonder if she knew that it was a classic. I mean, it was obviously a workhorse design in her oeuvre, you know, her workshop. This is a detail of the bodice, and as Leigh was mentioning, the monastic aspect is specific to these ties here. So really, this dress hangs straight when it's just hanging in our storage, right?
Right.
But it's these ties here, these long, slender spaghetti ties that you wrap around the body kind of as many times as you want, and then you can tie in a bow.
Right. It's 100% customizable, so you didn't need to wear a corset or an undergarment, and those were popular still in this period, but she really did not appreciate that underpinnings aspect. Like, no American woman wants to wear a corset with her sundress. So she said, you know, you can tie this as tight as you want, you can make it as loose as you want, and I think that that's an aspect of customizable fashion that is always going to appeal to women, honestly. And
also, it's going to fit many different women.
Yeah,
too.
and you know, and if you didn't love a spaghetti strap, she made this model with little puff sleeves. I mean, you know, it's a very easy to flatter every figure type of dress, and I just think that to me is ingenious, and she was ingenious in so many ways.
So
and
tell us about the pattern. Yeah.
I was gonna say, and the fabric. This is actually from 1952, which really helps us establish the date for the dress. The fabric was made by the Everfast company, but it wasn't just the Everfast company that came up with this idea. They worked with the Pan American Grace Airlines, so Panagra, to create a fabric line. Let me pull up one of my little, this is one of the most famous ads. It's actually a cross promotion, which we're really familiar with today in collaboration culture. The the airline wanted to promote travel to South America. Everfast wanted to promote their fabrics, and so they hooked up with Claire McCardell as well to promote their fabrics. And this fabric is all the fabrics were supposedly influenced by a lot of different South American cultures, and in a way it's sort of a blenderized version when you look at the fabrics and you're like, I don't really know exactly what they're referencing, but they seem to be drawing on ornament from South American cultures, many of them, and kind of putting them all together. This one, it's like what they would call what I would call a Greek key fret.
That's what I would.
It's an ornament. It's an ornament that transcends many cultures and many time periods. It actually is a Mesoamerican design. I mean, based on a Mesoamerican design. And I'm going to have to look down at my note and read this because it's a Mesoamerican word that I'm going to butcher. Hopefully not. Chicalcoliuqui, which is the it's like a fret stepped fret, and then in Spanish they called it greca. And it's just I mean, if you just want to look at it on one level, you can say it's an amazing geometric design. Bold, simple, effective. It reads well from far away. It reads beautifully up close. The company actually made this in another colorway as well. That was a red and yellow, like an orange. It's very fiery colors, and that was more like what they advertised in their line was the fiery tropical South American type of colors. This one, the black and white, to me is superior, and I love color, but the red and yellow doesn't have quite as much contrast. You can see if you go later, not now, you can go and find this play suit that was also illustrated in Vogue in 1952 in the Metropolitan Museum of Art's collection, and you can see that colorway, and it's just there's a little less contrast. It's lovely, but the black and white to me really is the better choice here for the motif. I think it's very bold and graphic. And
it would also read really well in advertisements. Now I know, like, if you're looking at Vogue or Harper's Bazaar, they did have color advertisements, but also, you know, so much of especially in the ready-to-wear industry for America, it was newspaper ads and so forth that were going across the country, either photographs or line drawings. And
Absolutely.
This would translate perfectly into that medium.
Absolutely. In fact, I was just showing up the ad that was actually in Vogue in December of 1952. It spreads into 2 pages, so you can see her shoes over there too. And it's not an ad for Claire McCardell. It's an ad for the fabric company. And that's another thing I love about this period is that Vogue and Harper's Bazaar and Glamour and other magazines were riddled with fabric ads for fabric. This is not something that contemporary fashion magazines care the least about today. And I think it's very sad. We have a very anonymous culture of textile design and manufacture, and I find that to be it's for the future of historians, like 100 years from now, they're going to look back and it's going to be very hard to figure out who did what. Like, I'm able to go look in a Vogue and say, oh, that great Claire McCardell dress was manufactured by the Everfast company, and it's a glazed fabric. They were very famous also for their everglaze treatment. So it's puckered, and it's almost like a seersucker. So it's puckered, and then they call it ciré, which is like a glazed wax effect. And so it's multi-dimensional. It has this pebbly texture to it without it being an actual texture that's in the weave structure. So I mean, kudos to the textile companies for working with these these designers to develop fabrics as well. Sometimes they had a lot of say in how things developed. And I think Claire McCardell was a genius in looking for really interesting textiles to work with, and also working with the companies to develop things that she wanted to use. So there was a lot of collaboration behind the scenes there as well. So.
Well, I want to say to any of our viewers, if you have questions, Leigh and I are watching the feed, and we'll be happy to try to answer anything that if we have the answer. So, okay, well, that was our first introduction to our collections today and Claire McCardell and her wonderful use of patterns. The next two, actually, I'm wrong. We have 4 garments, not 3 that we're going to be looking at today. So the next one is something that I'm really excited about because I actually brought this into the museum's collection now many years ago. This absolutely fantastic day dress.
Be still my heart. So
And I mean,
beautiful.
this is Claire at her finest with the use of stripes, really.
Absolutely. It's just she could look at a fabric and know exactly what to do with it to its best advantage. Like thinking about the fabric before she thought about the design, perhaps. Knowing that when you're going to cut the skirt this way, the stripes are going to start to fall on the bias and there's going to be almost a curved aspect to it. The bodice of this dress also is amazing because it's pinned, it's tucked on the sides along the stripe lines so that there's not like a dart. It's like a series of pin tucks, and it just folds the stripes into this like very tight array. It's just a beautiful dress from every angle, and the mitering and the stripes is just that I'm a sucker for the mitering.
Did you say you wanted to see the back?
Oh yes, I would love to see the back.
Okay. That easy.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, these are design details that are lost for the most part in today's contemporary fashion design. First of all, you know, when you miter with stripes, you waste a lot of fabric. So nobody wants to do that anymore to create an outstanding design. And there were definitely periods in American fashion in the war years especially where, you know, it was you didn't waste fabric, so there wasn't, you know, there wasn't a lot of call for that, except for maybe if you were Adrian. And it's just something that makes a dress much more spectacular, you know, and it's a special touch, and you have to design for that, and you have to plan for that, you know.
One of our viewers asked, was Claire McCardell involved at all in the textile designing process?
Now, that's a very good question. For this one, I can't say specifically that she helped design this. The woman who I am 99.9% sure, I have not found any advertisement or documentation to confirm this 100%, but I'm going to go out and say it. This was a fabric that was designed by Hope Skillman, who was renowned for her cottons and basically supplied the American fashion industry in this period, the 40s and 50s and 60s. She's retired in 60. She supplied them with the best cottons. She was known for her cottons throughout the industry, throughout the home sewing industry as well. I mean, her fabrics were available commercially, so that you could go to your department store and buy Hope Skillman by the yard and make your own dress. But she was also called the Stripe Queen. There's that detail. I mean, how beautiful is that? My gosh, just love that. I marvel at textile designers who use the structure of weaving to develop pattern. I really focus a lot of my energies on designs that are printed, but I really have a lot of admiration and respect for people who weave, because that is some complicated mathematical stuff that my brain sometimes has a hard time reconciling. This is like a very lightweight cotton chambray with these satin stripes. So she's combining 2 weave structures. It's a simple pattern. It is just stripes, but then you enter into color choice. And I have a feeling that this was an exclusive to Claire McCardell. And one of the things that Hope Skillman did, and other textile companies did as well, is they would enter into what they called confined designs. So they would be confined to a particular designer so that you wouldn't have other manufacturers, other designers using the same fabric as you were using, because that could kind of, you know, it's like showing up to the prom in the same dress as somebody else. You don't want that to happen. You don't want to see the same fabric being used by another company. I have a very strong feeling that this was Hope Skillman designed specifically for Claire McCardell. And I would have guessed that they were close enough and involved enough that she did have some input on the colorway and what she intended to use the design for.
Now, I think it's interesting at this time, because this is again also the early 50s, that you have Adrian, and his famous use of stripes, mitering as well. You have Irene with her suits and so forth. Claire McCardell didn't do suits as much as Irene or Adrian. She did do suits, but she was known more for her day dresses. But I think it's interesting that also she was a master at using mitered striped fabric as well. It definitely seems to be a really dominant technique in this late 40s, early 50s time period in American fashion.
Yes, yeah, stripes were very, very popular, and I think that it's all what you do with them. And there were a lot of really creative approaches to. I mean, you think it's like a boring thing, a stripe. How creative can that be? Well, when you get into the right hands, it can be pretty creative. So I think that's a great example.
One of our viewers asked, "How do you spell Hope's last name?"
Skillman. And you will find her obituary in the New York Times. And she was also, the very other interesting thing about Hope Skillman is she was a female entrepreneur. She had her own business called Skill Mill that she ran with only women. And she made a point of saying that in the press, that, you know, we know it's not because we have disdain for men. It's just that we know how to get the job done. And most of our clients are men anyway. So that's the other thing, the imbalance in the textile industry at the time. Most of the heads of companies were male, and all of the executives were male, and a lot of the talent was female. But she ran her own business, and in the end, she became very involved in women's rights and organizations. She, like in her obituary, she was described as one of America's first textile designers and a leader in the women's rights movement. So I found that really impressive about her. And when Claire McCardell passed away in '58, she was on a committee to start the scholarship at Parsons in Claire McCardell's name to have for scholarships for students. And she served on a lot of different boards and women's rights, women's groups. So I think she's kind of kick-ass. And nobody knows about her, really. I mean, I guess, you know, people who really get deep in the weeds of American textile design know her, but she's not a household name, and she really deserves to be, because she was supplying our industry with the high quality, amazing goods that are probably in a lot more vintage clothing than we all know.
So, I mean, Claire McCardell was one of the few women. There were, you know, a group that actually ended up with her name on the label. So it wasn't just Townley frock dresses, you know, and so, you know, well, did Claire McCardell dress it? Kind of looks like her style. You know, we know it's Claire McCardell because it's Claire McCardell for Townley frocks. And that's amazing, you know, because there were a few women who were able to get their names on those labels, but unfortunately not the textile artists. Yeah,
no, it's true. I mean, like I think of Margaret Fileggi at Cole, California, who used Skillman fabrics. She was like pretty anonymous behind the scenes for a very long time, but she ran that company. I wish, I mean, I've seen a couple of Hope Skillman ads, but it was more of an industry insiders, you know, everybody knew her name in the industry, but they did use her in advertisements to promote the materials that you could buy online. Excuse me. No, in department stores. Remember those? Well, and also I kind of remember because I'm old, but yeah, you used to be able to go to a department store and there was a whole department that had fabric and patterns, and there were a lot of tie-ins with fabric companies and pattern companies. So, you know, there was some recognition for her, but, you know, not as much as she deserved, for sure. But I think that sorry.
One of our viewers asked, was Hope Stillman also connected with Elizabeth Hawes? Do you know it? Have you seen that connection at all?
I have not seen that connection, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's just not something that was, you know, documented. Their names don't come up together in my research, but I wouldn't be surprised at all, because of course, yes, Elizabeth Hawes and her mitering of stripes is pretty legendary. So I wouldn't be surprised.
This is a really stunning woven fabric. I mean, the quality of it is really beautiful to feel.
Yeah, and I
it's
think
not like a cheap cotton
no,
at
she
all.
was known for very lightweight fabrics, sometimes almost sheer. This one's not sheer, but it's just the combination of the sort of matte plain weave ground and the satin stripes. I'm thinking this is probably like 50, 52, 53, because there were a lot of mentions of candy stripes, satin ribbon stripes in Hope Skillman and Mcardle literature that I have read. So I'm thinking it's probably around that date.
Well, another thing that I'm really excited about this dress, and the reason why I acquired it is because, drum roll, there were two dresses made of the same fabric. And I call them the sister dresses. I got them from a dealer at the old Santa Monica Vintage Expo, which doesn't exist anymore. It's really too bad. And I was amazed. And they were never worn. They're absolutely in flawless condition. The finishes, you know, that you were talking about, I don't know if this one is glazed per se, but it has definitely never been washed or dry cleaned or anything. It's absolutely just pristine. And I just thought it was really neat to see two Claire McCardell dresses with the same fabric, but treated differently, to see how she manipulated the design to create, you know, obviously part of a collection that she was working out. And I think another thing that's really exciting is with the advertisement that Joanna Abajouti, our social media director, she posted, you know, that we were going to be having our conversation today, and another museum has one of Claire's dresses in this same fabric, but it is now a third designed by her using this Hope Stillman fabric.
It's at the Design Center of Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia. Yeah, we posted these photos and they were like, we have one of this. And it's a completely different design. I mean, it's the same fabric, and it's so interesting. The variety is all in how you use the stripes. Now in this dress, which is quite extraordinary because it has I can't remember, Kevin, is the drape attached to it, the scarf?
No, so what it is, it's the dress itself, okay? And then this double drape here on both sides, and then also how it ties right here, goes over. It's a one shoulder shrug. And I wish you could see the pattern of it, because the shrug basically is this. The shrug is a long, straight, two layers of fabric, completely straight, that she cut it along the straight grain this direction of the stripe, right?
Yeah.
And then it just has the one shoulder here, but when you put it on and then you tie it and it's held by the belt, it creates another visual interest, because that straight grain that is cut crosswise, the way you actually put it on, falls straight grain as a normal dress fabric would. You know, you do the straight grain generally vertically. So it's fascinating that she created this garment that is absolutely horizontal if you just lay it out flat. Yeah. You know, when you've got the little arm where your arm would fit in. But then once it's tied, it does take on the straight grain. It's just a fascinating kind of mind.
And then the other thing that I want to point out about this version of the dress is it is using a secondary version of this textile, because you see in the skirt portion, there's a long portion of it that does not have the stripe. So there's like another story that she was like, I want actually one more of this version so that I can use it in this way. I'm sure that there were conversations about this and how am I going to use this? This is what I have in mind. What can we do to accommodate that? And I just love that now we know there's three. Oh, and the other dress at the Design Center has these really charming kind of puff sleeves. And they're long, almost like, you know, to elbow length puff sleeves. And the way that the mitering is done in the skirt, it makes a chevron pattern. It's just how are you going to make something interesting out of this? And Claire McCardell, she rose to the occasion on 3 different dresses.
And fascinating, because can you imagine figuring out the marking for the pattern pieces? And, Claire McCardell was also really well known for being an economical designer. She was not couture. And if you think of the American couture that was going on at the time, Norman Norell, James Galanos, they were really doing a lot of more European, maybe more French style of construction, of dressing at a very high price point. I mean, we're talking hundreds into the thousands of dollars for their dresses back in the 1950s. That was not Claire McCardell's clientele at all. She was economical, yet look what she was doing. Because as you mentioned, it's like the idea of waste. But I have a feeling that, and I haven't done this, but if you took these 3 dresses and you patterned them out on a similar kind of fabric, you would find that Claire McCardell figured out a way of doing these really fascinating designs with stripes on basic dresses, but also in an economical way.
I would agree with that. I don't have the evidence, but I think that all the signs point to that, absolutely. And everybody always says, well, she didn't like ornament, she didn't like fussy things. She did like ornament. She just didn't like sequins and embroidery and flash. But this, to me, has got all the ornament that you need, and it's simple. And I just adore these dresses. I adore this fabric, and I love that these 2 women are connected in this way. I think that's a really powerful story that kind of hope gets lost a little bit in the Mcardle story. So I'm glad that I've had the opportunity to talk about her a little bit today. So
one of our viewers asked if the other dress was on display at the museum. No, that one we've actually never exhibited. Yeah. This dress we will be displaying it. We're very excited. This photograph is from our upcoming catalog, Sporting Fashion, Outdoor Girls 1800 to 1960. And you could not do an exhibition on sportswear and not include Claire McCardell. I mean, it just, you fall flat on your face.
Yeah, you would have gotten spanked if you didn't include her.
Yeah, exactly. And I just want to point out to everybody, I'm really proud. The sunglasses the mannequin is wearing are also by Claire McCardell. So this will be in our upcoming project. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, I can't wait for the catalog.
Neither can I.
Yeah.
So this was a really neat find for me. I was really excited to be able to do that, and then that we now have found a third of this patterned fabric.
A woman who bought 2 dresses of the same fabric and seemingly never wore them. Like, I'm sorry that she never got to wear them, but I love that woman. The woman who was like, I love this so much, I want it in 2 versions because I don't know what I'm going to feel like on one day versus another day. So I love that story.
Right. So one question is, when will the catalog be available? It actually comes out, you can order it now on Amazon. And it's supposed to come out, we've been told, March 2nd. Now, don't hold me to that because, every 5 seconds something is changing with COVID. So, but that is when the catalog is scheduled to come out, is in March 2nd, 2021. Also, I had another question. Okay. Let's go back. How does the shrug work? There is no sleeve, so this is the armhole. Think of it as a really long, narrow piece of fabric, straight grain, as I was mentioning, horizontal, right? And that gets folded over, okay? So that's what you would have on either side of your body. It's folded over the shoulder, okay? And this side was attached, it's over the shoulder here, right? So it goes up and over the shoulder. And then that fabric is seamed along the one edge. So it's over the shoulder, so it's seamed right here. Mm. So all you do is but with an opening. for an arm size. So it goes over the shoulder here, it's seamed here, but there's an opening right here. So you just put your arm through, and remember, it's this folded over, so it's vertical. So you put your arm in, and then it just falls with gravity, creating then that vertical, the straight grain goes vertical as it normally would have been cut. So it's a really simple, very simple patterning with no waste of fabric at all, because it's just one long horizontal that then ties interestingly and is held in by the belt. And you can see the mannequin hand. I positioned it so you can see each side of the fabric as it fell over the body and over the skirt. So, I mean, it's really ingenious, incredibly effective, would still look beautiful in a solid fabric, but of course, the stripes give it even more dynamism. And I finally figured out how this tied, because there's no instructions. There was a Claire McCardell paper doll book that came out. Do you remember what year? Was it like 51?
I don't.
I think it was like 51, this charming Claire McCardell pattern book. Paper doll book, and on the cover is a dress that we also have in our collection that's beautifully patterned. We should have brought it out. And it has a similar tying mechanism held in by the belt. So, you know, Claire McCardell was all about practicality, and not only in her construction, but also in the wear. These were not fussy clothes with lots of hooks and eyes, and you have to turn, you know, try to zip it up the back and then turn it around and finish it over the shoulder.
You can get in and out of them all by yourself. You don't have to have your husband hook this or that or unlace this or that. It's like woman on the go. I don't have time for this. I just put it on and go. And yeah, she was really, truly, I mean, it seems simple when you look at it, but simple is hard. That's the thing.
1956 is when the paper doll book comes.
Oh, Maggie.
Thank you, Denise Spring.
That's Maggie.
Yeah. So, you know, this, you just put your arm in, do a tie, and you can just, you know, the waist, the little belt will hold it. It's charming. I love it.
And one of the Mcardleisms that I love is that she said, you know, casual does not mean careless. So you can look cash, but you don't have to look sloppy. It can be as easy and effortless as throwing something on, adjusting a few little waist ties or straps. And if you, let's say you have a big lunch, you can undo the straps a little bit. You know, it's like, it's designed for ease, but it doesn't look like sweatpants. Sorry.
Right, exactly.
nothing against sweatpants for the people who love the sweatpants, but it's just that was the idea of what was casual and what was easy and your town clothes. I mean, yeah.
Okay, well, now we are going to move on to Claire McCardell, number 4. And this is our latest Claire McCardell. This is brand new, hot off the press. And we're really, really excited about it because it is one of her absolutely charming play suits.
Yay! Wow. This Be Still My Beating Heart. This is my favorite thing ever. It's, yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to begin. But I will say that I was very happy and pleased to help bring this to the attention of Mr. Curator Kevin Jones. I was on Instagram following, you know, I think it was like, because I'm working on this book and I'm very into novelty prints and trying to show some of the more serious ideas and stories behind some things that, you know, people dismiss novelty as being silly or, you know, cutesy, juvenile, but there's a lot of serious stuff behind some of these prints. So I follow novelty print, and one day, Claire McCardell play suit pops up into my feed, and it was a really, really lovely seller, Sarah at Sleepy Lagoon Vintage. And she said, I'm gonna have to do a little more research about who made this pattern, but it's Claire McCardell. And I was like, you know, DM'd her right away. I said, oh, I know, I can tell you everything you want to know about that pattern. Is it for sale? And she's like, well, I have a price. Yeah, I was like, okay, well, you get a price on it, and I know somebody who might be interested in it. So let me help you out with that. And I'm glad to have played matchmaker for both of them. She had two. And we went with this colorway. Let me tell you a little bit about this print.
Well, wait. First of all,
Okay.
you saw it on Instagram, and then you immediately sent me a message with the photo of the suit. And I mean, and I couldn't type fast enough. You know, like, did you get it? Did you get it? Is it ours? You know, tell her we want it.
You were like, first you were like, pass. And I was like, no. He did not do that. He knew what he was looking at. It's a rare thing. I'll start with the fabric is called Parade Sauvage, and it's designed by Fernand Léger, the famous French artist, modern master. And it is based on one of his artworks. I'm going to pull that up real quick. So you can see the pattern is very faithfully adapted from this artwork, which appeared in an artist's book, an artiste livre d'artiste, in 1949 that he illustrated for a book called Les Illuminations, and that is by Arthur Rimbaud, which was written in 1886, and it's a collection of, like, I think 42 poems. And one of the poems is called Parade Sauvage. And what you can see in the print, and here's another version of it in a different colorway, the writing says, J'ai sur le clé de cette parade sauvage, which translates to, I alone have the key to this wild procession or savage parade. And it's just the poem title. It was adapted by the Fuller Fabrics Company, Daniel Fuller. In 1955, they released this line called the Modern Master Originals. And it was a line that had just the biggest names of the art world at that time, who were household names, literally. Picasso, Miro, Chagall, Leger, and Raoul Dufy, who actually had died right in the midst of the project, so he didn't get the final say on his artworks. But Fuller met, here I'm going to grab one little reference here. So this is American Fabrics magazine. This is one of mine. We have this in the collection at the museum, and I actually, before I was able to acquire this, I had to go to the FITA Museum and look at their copy for my research. I've been researching this topic, this particular fabric line, for like 6 years, and I have to say I think I'm the authority on it in the world, but I haven't published it yet, so I got to get on that. But basically, there was an article in American Fabrics that I needed to consult, and it's all about this project. I'm going to try to hold this up so you can see it. So American Fabrics magazine is a trade publication, and this whole article is about the saga of Dan Fuller and the Modern Masters. What he did was in 1953, excuse me, he approached Picasso through a mutual friend and said, I have this idea for a line of fabrics. Would you be interested? And Picasso had been approached many times before and was like, no, I'm not interested. And he said, I guarantee you that there will be fidelity to your artworks. We will make it, you will have all the rights to be involved with the production. And so Picasso was like, okay, sounds good. And then he went to his buddies and got them all on board. And so you had the initial line of fabrics. It took 2 years from the start to finish to produce them. They had 1 whole year was engraving the copper roller. So these are roller printed. Wow. And so it took a long time for them to get that. All the artworks were adapted from milestones in the artist's career. So you'll see in the line there's a range of different styles from different periods of their work. And
did you say that you wanted to see the back of this?
I do want to see the back of it. Because she's so sassy in the back. Love it. It's like a little tiny, so this is a play suit. So it's got little bloomers underneath.
Little puffy bloomers. Mm-hmm.
Puffy little bloomers, because that's Claire's touch. And then this just adorable skirted bodice with these tiny little brass ball details on the front. It's adorable. It's truly, I would love to have this. Yeah, I just want it. But I'm glad it's in the museum collection because then I get to talk about it. So essentially, it was a major textile line, and it was received national coverage. It was covered in Vogue magazine. It was covered in Harper's Bazaar. Here's one ad for a Mcardle that was in Harper's Bazaar in December of 1955. And then also in November, Life magazine published a whole photo editorial on this project, where they were actually they sent Bettina, the model, to all of the studios of these artists and photographed them in their studios. And here's a photograph of that's not Bettina, but another model with Fernand Léger in his studio in one of her dresses. It's a long version of a dress. And that photo was taken 2 weeks before he died. So that was also very good timing. But yes, it was national. There was like a TV spot. It was in all the trade press, and it was available by the yard. It had commercial pattern tie-ins. Fuller even produced a documentary, and you can Google it. I do believe it's on YouTube now. It hasn't been widely available for a long time. I actually received my copy from my wonderful colleague Susan Brown at the Cooper Hewitt Museum. She sent it to me many years ago so I could watch it, and it's charming. He goes to all of the studios of all these famous names, and he shows them their fabric, and they are so excited by this fabric. You would not believe. I mean, it's like giddiness. All these artists were so happy to participate because they actually realized that the art market was very elitist, and they did want their artwork to get into the average person's home. And this sort of like art to, like, making your life a museum and art to wear was a very populist idea at this time.
So one of the questions from Jennifer is, how common are extant examples garments made from these fabrics? And I'm going to add, have you seen very many panels, just the panels of the fabrics that have survived? They're
not abundant, given the fact that I have often been asked, like, how much did they print? I have no idea how much yardage they printed. But there are links that come up from time to time on eBay, in vintage sellers. They are found in several museum collections. Surprisingly, the leading number of examples in a museum collection is at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, because the director of the museum, when the fabrics launched, actually wrote to Fuller Fabrics and asked for a sample of each. They did not receive a sample of each, but they received dozens, like 40 examples. And it was because, and I think this is a really interesting approach, they bought them for their circulating design collection. So it was more like a study resource. They wanted to make sure that they captured that moment in time in their collection. A lot of curators and collectors spend a lot of time looking back a century to find the things that they want, and they miss the moment that we're in to buy the things that are there, because in 100 years you're going to be looking for those things. Right. So the idea that this curator was like, I would love to document these, because we always buy contemporary textiles to put into our collection. So yeah, the Victoria and Albert has a great resource. Berea College has quite a few as well, because they asked for them for their home ec department. Cooper Hewitt Fuller Fabrics made a donation to the Cooper Hewitt Museum of several designs, and they also have a dress that was donated several years ago by Elena Phipps, who's a textile scholar. And FIT has
I have
a
to
dress.
say, the FIT Museum was not around, otherwise we would have asked as well.
I know. And other than that, LACMA has several examples. In fact, they were a client of mine when I worked at Cora Ginsberg's, and so T.T. Halley at Cora Ginsberg's has quite a few of these textiles in her inventory. They're available, but they're not common. They're scarce, and I have still not seen all the patterns.
Do you know? Yeah, because somebody asked how many patterns were there.
In press, they said over 60, but I have not seen 60. I have seen, I would say, over 40, but I haven't. There's still some that I see reference to that I have never seen.
Right.
But someday they'll still surface there. And
Do
oh, that's the other thing is you will know most of the time when you find one of these fabrics because it's marked on the selvage. It says a modern master original by, you know, Fuller Fabrics, DB Fuller and Company, and then it will have the title and then artist name. I mean, they make it very simple to find. If you decide to look for selvage in a garment, you might find something there. But yeah, they were copyrighted. So they're very proudly marketing these as artworks, arts to wear. Oh my God, that's the view. I love that.
Side.
Oh, she is so sassy. I love her. I'm so glad to have her in our collection. These garments really just don't come up very often. And Claire McCardell was one of the big, again, like the Everfast promotion. She really was the designer who put her mark on this collection.
Did she use more than one of the fabrics for her designs, or did she just use the Leger?
No, she used more than one. She used quite a few of the Chagall prints. They were very ethereal and dreamy. Kent State Museum has several. I think they have 2 or 3 of those designs. The Maryland Historical Society has one. Those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. And hopefully people will write in and say, hey, I have this one too. But yes, she did use some Chagalls. And there's one Miro that she used in the Life. If you look for the Life, November 1955, I think it's November 14th, 1955, that editorial has a Miro pattern in a pinafore. It's over shorts. It's like a dress over shorts. It is the cutest thing ever. And it's one of the better patterns. Not all of the patterns in that collection were very successful, to be honest.
You found this one.
Fabric.
You found this one, and you found this one. So you've started a work project for you. You now need to find one of every one of them for the FITA Museum. You know, and you cannot leave us until we have all of the fabrics. So I'm afraid you're going to be with us a long time.
That's a tall order. I will say in my personal collection, I do have a few. And the FITA Museum can ask me for a donation someday.
Yay, that's great. So, you know, we never know what's going to pop up, you know, and in our lookings. And I have to say, it's fascinating how the internet, both all the different sites you can go to, people's individual dealer sites, but also, you know, now people just posting really beautiful things on Instagram. And, you know, you have to be quick now, like really quick, because you've got the whole world watching. It's not just going to a vintage show and you see something and you get to contemplate it, you know, I mean, and
that's true.
And it's tricky also for museums because generally you've got to bring something to the museum. We need to look it over. We want to make sure it's not damaged. It hasn't been altered. It hasn't been washed out to, you know, smithereens.
Yeah.
But nowadays, for something that's, you know, very kind of iconic and designed for an era, you have to kind of snap real fast to make that decision if you're going to be able to acquire it.
You sure do. You got. Sometimes you got to take a gamble. I mean, this looked pretty good from the photos, and one thing that was very touching to me is that Sarah at Sleep Lagoon Vintage was really excited that this was going into a museum collection, and I applaud her for that because this is also. The wearable market is very strong, and I know that there would have been a lot of people out there who would have absolutely just died to add this to their collection so they could wear it to the beach, to the pool, whatever. And I'm thinking, oh my God, sun and chlorine and like all the things that you just don't want to have exposed to fabric. I understand that there's the competition between the museum world and the wearable world, and I do want to make it very clear that not everything belongs in a museum. Not every vintage piece is like a relic from a bygone era that needs to be preserved for eternity. But some things that have a very important story to tell, or sometimes the most humble thing, sometimes the most extravagant thing, you do want it in a museum so that, for example, now we can include it in future programming and add other objects to complement it and tell a fuller story of a really amazing period of time in our country. So,
well, and I think had we gotten this in time, it would have been included in sporting fashion.
well, there's maybe a round 2 somewhere, Kevin. I bet you can do it.
We could do sporting fashion part 2.
Well, someday it would be really great to, I mean, we have in the breadth of this collection of American sportswear that we have, there are so many extraordinary fabrics that have prints or design elements that are woven. It would be great to do an exhibition on American fabric design. I don't know who you'd get to help with that project, really.
I don't know either. I have always wanted to do a show that would look at, from the 18th century to the mid-18th century to the mid-20th century, how fashion and interiors paralleled one another. You know, we really don't have that in our life today so much, but definitely, you know, up to the post-contemporary or post-modern, you know, things really paralleled very beautifully. And I've always thought it would be really fun to do a show like that.
I think it's true. I think a lot of the
times, furniture.
Yeah, well, a lot of the times we don't look at things holistically. We see fashion over here, and we see textiles over there, and we see furnishings over there, and they all existed in the same space at the same time. Right. So to see people in their clothing, in their interiors, is really a great thing to do. I'm wholeheartedly in favor of that idea. I want to give one last little shout out, because I wouldn't be this passionate about this subject matter if it weren't, I'm going to get teary-eyed a little bit, if it weren't for my mentor, T.T. Halley and Michelle Major at Cora Ginsberg Gallery, because they got me into this artist design fabric stuff, and I got so hooked that it just became like a burning passion for me to find out more and more and more and more. And although I was so lucky to be exposed to centuries worth of antique textiles and clothing and every type of fabric imaginable, to me, I was allowed to have a lot of free reign and play with that part of the collection and helping to source materials that did wind up in museum collections. And I'm very grateful for the education I received there that went beyond my real like school education, the education of
the
things, the education of feeling things, touching things, turning them inside out, learning, and also the generosity of spirit that says like, oh hey, yeah, I'm busy, I'm not going to help you with that. No, she would always say, oh, I know the book we should look at, come and look at this, or let's compare this and that. Or, you know, it was just that it was a facet of her business, the artist design textiles, that truly has changed my professional focus, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful to work with a wonderful museum. I'm grateful to work with a wonderful museum team who puts up with my complete focus on textiles, and how they are used in fashion is important to me. So I'm glad to work with all of my colleagues as well.
Well, our hour is up already.
No!
It's literally gone by that fast. Now, so just to let all the viewers know, we are in 2 weeks, we're planning our next collection conversation, and I hope you did not get enough of Leigh Wishner, because she is actually going to be taking my seat as the host of Collection Conversations the next time, and we're lining up a very special guest, and we can't name that person yet. So, yeah. So, but I want to thank you today, wherever you are, and one last shout out before Instagram cuts me off completely, but we want to say a special happy birthday to Christina Johnson, our associate curator. Today is her very birthday. So happy birthday to you. And to all of our viewers, thank you for joining us, and stay safe, and make sure you wear your mask. See you later.
Oh yeah, I don't have one.
Bye-bye.
Now. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you giving me the time.